Hello, welcome back. If it's your first time here, welcome. We do, again, have a lot of new faces around here, people who have recently subscribed. If you're one of them, thank you so much for watching that last video that you watched and for coming back for this one. I normally record just by like the natural light of this little window that I have over here, but today it's very gloomy and doomy outside, so I had to set up a different light over there. So if the lighting looks intense, that's why. Most likely you have not noticed that or do not care. In my last video, I went on a mini rant on how I don't really think it's healthy to set a numerical target for your reading goals. To summarize, I really just don't think it's fair to yourself to set a goal of reading 5 books and then only reading 2 and being disappointed with yourself. Not all books are created equal. Plus, life happens, life gets in the way, and you should just do what you want to do when you want to do it. If that is reading, that's great. If it is not, that is also great. And I don't think we should beat ourselves up for spending our time the way that we want to spend our time in the moment, just because a past version of ourselves was more aspirational. If you want to hear me ramble more about that, again, I did talk about it a lot in my last video, but regardless, moving on. So I don't love the idea of setting a number of books and then being disappointed in yourselves if you don't hit it. I still do set the number personally, but I don't take it too seriously. So, for example, I'm not going to hit my target this year. I don't really care about that. It doesn't matter to me. I read a lot of books this year that I really liked, and that's what is important to me. So I am probably going to set a target for 2025 of how many books I want to read, but I will probably be setting it quite low so that I can still click the buttons and get my dopamine rush when I hit my goal. But while I won't be putting a lot of thought into that number that I select and the number of books that I'm reading as the year goes on, I do still like to make a loose plan or kind of almost a wish list of things that I want to read. This is something that again, I don't take all that seriously, but I do think it's really fun. I am at my core a mood reader above all else. So when I finish a book, I'm just going to pick up the next book that I want to pick up. But I do like having in the back of my mind kind of these targets that I've set for myself. And next week's video, I plan on talking about those targets, those goals that I'll be setting for myself for next year. But when I was planning out the video for next week, I realized that there was a lot to talk about. I was writing down a list of those goals and yeah, there was a good amount and I wanted to make sure that everything kind of got its own time without making the video too bloated. I was initially planning on just talking about all that in my December wrap-up video, but I've instead decided to kind of shift up my plans here for this month. So I had a little community post that I put out about this, but essentially I'm going to be skipping my TBR Cole video that would normally be dropping this week. And I'm also going to be skipping my board game related video, which would be dropping next week, in favor of making a couple more videos this month in which I can talk about how my year went and kind of how I want next year to go, or at least my current vision for 2025 when it comes to my reading. So in today's video, I'm going to be looking backwards a little bit, looking at series that I have started, not necessarily in 2024, but series that I've started up until now that I would like to continue in the new year. And then next week's video will be all just kind of those goals that I was talking about for 2025. And then at the end of the month, instead of doing a December wrap-up, I'm just going to do a 2024 wrap-up video where I'll talk about maybe the highlights of, the best books that I've read in 2024 and just give kind of a summary on my reading as a whole this year, what that all looked like, what it ended up all being. And then I'll also talk about how the channel's been going and future plans for the channel in 2025. But anyway, I did it again. I keep starting these videos with too long of a ramble about what I'm going to do. I'm going to dive in now. I'm going to dive into what we're here for, which is series that I've started that I want to continue in 2025. I'm doing pretty well. I put together this list of the series that I've started, and it came down to only 12 series, at least 12 series that I want to continue. There are other series that I've read book 1 of, but I'm not necessarily sure if I want to continue, or I know that I don't want to continue, even though some of those series, I know book 2 is coming out in the new year. Like, I read Fourth Wing, and I read Dragon Rider, and I read The Will of the Many. I think at least 2 of those are going to have the newest installment dropped in 2025, but I'm not sure if I'm going to continue continue those series. So I'm not going to be talking about those today. The 12 series that I am going to be talking about today are all series that I have read at least one book in. And actually, I'm looking at the list right now. It's in front of me. And I'm realizing that almost all of them I have read exactly one book in the series. And some of them that's a novella or really a short story. So I'm not in too deep on most of these. But I think it would be kind of nice to catch up in these series. A lot of them have a new book coming in 2025. So it'd be really cool if I was able to catch up in time for that to release. And some of them, that's already the case. Some of them I am caught up. I've read one book. The second book is dropping this year. I'm already caught up. I'm ready to go. I'm excited. But others, I've got quite a bit of work to do to get caught up. Some of these are completed series. Some of these are ongoing series. It's really a mixed bag. Like I said, there are 12 series here. And here on my planet, we only have 12 months in the year. So I would have to seed a kind of a slot every month to one of these series in order to make progress on all of them. And that's probably not going to happen. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Present Charlie thinks that Future Charlie could possibly do it. Future Charlie is probably going to think that Past Charlie was kind of crazy, but whatever. The first one I want to talk about today is not necessarily a series. By definition, I don't think it counts as a series, but I've seen some people call it a series, so I'm just going to go for it. The Cosmere as a whole. It's Brandon Sanderson's connected universe of books, and he's got a lot in it. And over the last couple of years, I have read just about all of them. I am currently reading Wind and Truth, our latest release from Brandon Sanderson. And after I finish this, I have one more book to read. That's Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. And then I'm all caught up. So that will be happening. I will be reading Yumi and the Nightmare Painter in 2025. And I'm really excited about that. I will be fully caught up finally on Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. I'm mostly mentioning this one because Brandon Sanderson is an absolute monster. He's one of my favorite authors right now. And if he does release any new books this year, I probably will pick them up, especially if they are Cosmere related. I know that he has a short story collection dropping sometime this year, and he also has the latest secret project dropping this year. Both of those I've already pre-ordered, and I will be reading at least that secret project kind of as soon as I can. As soon as it is out and available to me, I'll be picking it up. But I also think that I saw that the novelization of White Sand might be dropping by the end of 2025, and if that happens, again, that's something that I want to pick up. I'm not sure if that's been confirmed yet, but I have not read the graphic novel series of White Sand, and that is because I want to wait for the novelization of it. So as soon as that drops, I'm on board. I'm excited for that one. But from here on out, I'm going to be talking about true series, just a series of books. The first of which is the Shadow of the Leviathan series. I did not know that was the name of this series until I looked it up for this video, but that is the name of the series, which The Tainted Cup is from. So The Tainted Cup is a book that I read this year, and I loved it. This is really cool. The world in this is nuts, and I have so many questions about that world. The magic system also is so cool. We follow our main character, Din, who is something called an engraver. And what that means is he can open up a vial of some strongly scented something, and he can engrave in his mind a memory and tie it directly to that smell, playing on how your sense of smell can trigger memories, but turning that up to 1,000. So he can later open up that same vial, take a whiff, and remember every single detail of whatever it was. The Tainted Cup was a murder mystery, so he could be at the scene of the crime, open up a vial, take a whiff, and he has the crime scene kind of memorized, and then he can go later somewhere else and report that to the lead investigator or whatever, and in exact detail. And I think we only got a handful of examples of kind of the powers that are available in this world, but they were all really cool. Honestly, I think we only got an example of one other ability that people can have in this world. I'm really curious to see what else Robert Jackson Bennett has in store for us. I feel like he's gonna bring in even more abilities in this next book. and I need to know more. What can these people do? The great thing about the abilities in this book is that they come at a really high cost. I don't want to tell you more about that and like what those trade-offs are, but they're severe. So whatever ability a person has, there are severe consequences for choosing to take on that ability. I think it's like, some procedure that you have to go through to take on these abilities. But yeah, it's quite a choice to make. Beyond all that, even like beyond the abilities that I think Robert Jackson Bennett is going to create in this new book, I am also hoping that he explores the world around our characters more. The series, again, is called Shadow of the Leviathan, and that's because there are these Leviathans, these giant kaiju-like monsters out in this world threatening the town or the city that we're set in. But it's kind of barely touched on in this first book. It's a big piece of it, but we barely scratched the surface, and I need to know more. I actually have the arc for book 2 on my Kindle, and I think it's very likely that I pick this one up in January. I can't remember when the actual book is going to be released, but I'm very much looking forward to that book. In a similar vein of murder mystery set in a fantasy world, we have a book that always comes to mind when I think of The Tainted Cup, and that is Murder at Spindle Manor. This is the Lamplight Murder Mystery series. I always do think of these two books together because I did read one right after the other. I read The Tainted Cup and then I immediately picked up Murder at Spindle Manor. So they're very closely associated in my brain. But I love Murder at Spindle Manor. If you haven't checked this one out, definitely do it. Novella. It's a short book. And not only was it short, but it was a really quick read. It was a page turner. It doesn't take up much of your time, but it earns every second. The characters are wacky. The premise is wild. And there are so many things that happen from the beginning to the end of this book that I just, they're you see it for a paragraph and then you're like, well, wait, what was that? And then you're onto something new and you're like, wait, what is this? And then you turn the page and it's something completely different. You're like, wait, what is happening? And there are so many questions, but not in an annoying way. Like, I never felt like I wasn't given enough information for me to understand the story at large, but I always felt like I wanted more out of it. Like, I want to know what this little thing was. Like, I feel like it's significant, but I don't know for sure. And it's never mentioned again in this short little novella, but I feel like it must be mentioned in the next one or the one after that, because there are 2 more stories written and released: The Murder on the Lamplight Express and Murder on Hunter's Eve. Both of these, again, are novellas, and I need them now. I think the main couple characters are going to follow us from this first book into the second and the third books, but most of the cast, I believe, will be gone, because I think the case that we're solving is going to be completely different. And I'm really curious to see if any of the other members of the cast come back in book 2 and book 3, but I'm also really excited to meet the new characters that the author can come up with. Really, really excited to pick up book 2 and honestly probably book 3 in 2025, because this first book has kind of solidified this genre as something that I'm interested in, this crossover between fantasy and murder mystery, and I want to continue exploring that. Another series that has the newest book dropping really early next year is the Shadowbinders series. This is a series being written by fellow YouTuber and friend of the channel, Andrew Watson. If you somehow have found my channel and you don't know about his, you should absolutely go check out his stuff. Along with his YouTube channel, I'm a big fan of his Discord server. I spend a lot of my time there, so I would also recommend checking out the Discord, and I would also recommend checking out his series. I've only read Silence is Silver so far, but I've read it twice. My experience with it might be a little biased because he was nice enough to involve me in his beta read, which was super fun, and I really loved that, and it made the reread of this book even more fun because I got to like find sections of the book that I feel like I commented on something, and then I got to see how he interpreted that comment, or that he took a suggestion or whatever. Not that I'm taking any credit for the quality of this book, but it was really fun for me. This is incredibly short, and I think it was really fun. And it's technically, I think, a prequel story. I own the physical copy here, but you can actually get this entire story for free just by signing up for his newsletter. So if you like free stuff, check that out. Like I said, Silence is Silver is a prequel novella, or actually I think technically it's a short story, but whatever. It's a prequel to book 1 of his Shadowbinders series, which is called Harbinger of Justice. This is quite a bit chunkier, and I've heard really good things. So I'm excited to finally pick this up. I might also be able to get to this in January, but more than likely I'll be picking this up in February, which is also the month when book 3 is supposed to drop. Having read only the prequel short story, I can't really tell you much about what this story is about, but I know that it's like an ancient Egyptian inspired story, and based on the title of the series, The Shadowbinders, I also believe that the magic system is kind of all built around shadows, shadow magic, which I think is really cool. I'm really into that sort of thing. I really liked the setting that was being built in Silence is Silver, and I liked the characters that we were introduced to, although I do not think most of those characters are going to carry over into Harbinger of Justice. I think the main character in Silence is Silver is kind of like a side character, or maybe even like a background character in Harbinger of Justice. But I think what Silence is Silver succeeded in doing was set up the world by like setting up the culture of these characters. So while the characters may or may not be super critical to the overarching story of the series, I imagine that the baseline knowledge of the culture that I've built up should be critical, at least by the end. So yeah, excited to see how that little short story will impact the greater series, and really looking forward to picking up Harbinger of Justice at the very least, and then hopefully The Black Mantle after that. The next 2 series are 2 that I'm going to kind of lump together and not spend a ton of time on. Not because they don't deserve it, but because I just talked about them in my last video. So if you've seen that, you've already heard everything that I'm going to say. They really could not be much more different from one another, but again, I just talked about them. So Gunmetal Gods and the Hybrid Helix. Gunmetal Gods, I read the free prequel novella, I believe it is. I know it's a novella. I think it's a prequel story. I got that again just by signing up for Zamil Akhtar's newsletter, and it was so good. It was a really dark story where we follow a really cool character as she works her way through like kind of a battle, and kind of this overarching battle with herself. She wants to die this warrior's death, but she is unable to. She's disallowed the privilege of an honorable death by some god who is preventing her from dying. There's some insane visualizations done in the writing here, and it paints quite a picture in your mind, and it is so dark and dreary, and it puts you right there. You are in her blood-stained boots, and I loved every second of it. The first book, by the way, was called Death Rider, and the series is called Gunmetal Gods, and book 1 is also called Gunmetal Gods. I definitely want to pick up Gunmetal Gods next year. I probably will only make it to this first book unless it like wows me and I need to pick up books 2, 3, and I think 4. Yeah, 4 just dropped this year too. These are all somewhere between 400 and 600 pages, so they're not short books. They're, you know, that's a full-length novel for sure, but they all look insane. I mean, the covers alone look absolutely insane, but apparently they're also really well written, which I fully believe based on the novella that I've read so far. I absolutely cannot wait to sink my teeth into this dark, dreary, Lovecraftian series. And then the next one, which again I talked about in my last video, is Hybrid Helix. This, again, nothing like Gunmetal Gods. This is a much lighter kind of in tone story. The Hybrid Helix starts with Zero Twist, which is again free. You get that again by signing up for JCM Burns newsletter. And then there's also book 1 that I've read, Wistful Ascending, and book 6 is dropping this month. So again, there's 4 books in this series that I have not read. And by the end of this month, there will be a 5th book in the series that I have not read. But I loved that prequel short story, and I really loved book 1. And since then, I've heard that book 1 is like the weakest in the series. So if I really liked that and it's the weakest, I cannot wait to see what book 2 has in store for me. These are like perfect little blockbuster books. I mean, they're full-length novels, but they're quick, they're easy, they're fun, and they're fast-paced. They're great for like filling in the spaces between large reads or heavier reads or slower reads. They are just, you can burn through them. They are a little bit mindless in that the story just, it flows so smoothly. It's not mindless in that they're dumb or poorly written. That's not the case at all. But they don't take themselves too seriously, even though the stakes are pretty high, but they're written in such a way that it just kind of, I don't know how to explain it. You just glide through the story. It's like superheroes in space with a lot of aliens, and there's like some giant aliens, like kaiju kind of stuff happening, and sentient spaceships, and just a lot of wacky stuff. And I can't wait for book 2. In a weirdly similar vein, we have the Dresden Files. I think I have seen that JCM Byrne of Hybrid Helix has been inspired by Jim Butcher's Dresden Files, and they occupy a similar space in my brain where it's just like, easy. And again, that's not a commentary about like the quality of the writing, because like, I think these are great, but they're just these popcorn books. They just like, you sit back and you just take it in, and you don't have to think a lot about what's going on. I have only read book 1 of the Dresden Files, but I absolutely loved it. And I heard book 2 is actually pretty weak. And so I'm a little bit, put off by that, but not enough to stop me from reading it, because I've heard that the series as a whole is tremendous. And based on book 1, I know that I'm going to like it. I know that I'm going to like the series as a whole. So if I have to make it through book 2 to get to that, I don't mind it, because they're really quick. Book 2 is not very long, and the characters that I met in book 1 were fantastic. So I want to spend more time with them. I'm looking forward to getting to know them some more. This series is an urban fantasy series where we follow our main character, Harry Dresden, who is a wizard detective, and they have this kind of monster of the week feel to them, where every book it seems to follow some other kind of like monster or like type of monster. Like book 2 is called Full Moon, so I'm kind of assuming we're dealing with werewolves in book 2, things like that. It's a very long series. I think there's 16 books in it, and I think he's actually actively still writing new books in the series, Jim Butcher. So that's really cool. I don't know when I'll be like fully caught up. I definitely won't be caught up by the end of this next year, but this will definitely be used as a filler book for me, and it'll be used if I find myself in a reading slump, or if I just need something quick and easy between books. I'll probably just alternate between Hybrid Helix and the Dresden Files, and our next book that I'm going to talk about, which is Dungeon Crawler Carl. This again has a lot of those similar qualities to those last 2 books, where it's just easy. It's just mindless. But this one is also so funny. I think it's funny. I don't know if the humor is for everybody. I don't think any humor is for everybody. But the humor in these Dungeon Crawler Carl books is just perfectly tuned to my liking. At least most of the time it is. The other thing that this series has going for it is that the audiobooks are immense. They're so well done. And I don't know how one person is capable of making all these voices that are so varied, but they manage. They do a fantastic job with that. The writing in these books is also wild to me. I don't know how Matt Dinniman, the author, was able to balance this kind of like over the top humor with like emotional depth. Like I care about these characters, and every now and then you'll be like laughing a lot, and then you turn the page and you're like punched right in the heart. And I don't know how he does it. It's very impressive. I'm looking forward to more of those kind of deep cut moments and learning more about the characters that we already know, as well as being introduced to new ones, and exploring the depth of kind of the world as a whole, or really the universe as a whole, because this is like intergalactic. It's not just set on this planet. The basic premise is that we are here on Earth, and our main character, Carl, has to chase his cat who just jumped out a window. So he leaves his building, and then all of the buildings around him collapse. All of the buildings and like vehicles and like spaces where a human could fit in collapse. And so most people die. The rest of the people make their way down into these tunnels that kind of open up, and then they find themselves on this intergalactic television show. And in this show, they have to survive. It's kind of Hunger Games-esque, but there is no volunteering and there are millions of people entered in, and the contestants have to make their way through this dungeon, or like, the floors of the dungeon, each level with kind of its own world in it and its own set of rules, or not necessarily rules, but you have to deal with different things on each level. I have read books 1 and 2. 1 was so good. 2 was maybe not quite as good, but I still had a really good time with it. And again, this is one where people said, oh yeah, 2 is the weakest. And I'm like, all right, well, I really like that. So that bodes well for the rest. And I will definitely be picking up book 3. Again, these are audiobooks, so I often have like a physical read and an audio read, and this is a very easy selection for me for when I need just filler audio. Easy pick. Cannot wait for more Dungeon Crawler Carl. Kind of similar in a weird way are the Books of Babel, which is the next series that I want to talk about. It's not really similar. Like in most ways, it is vastly different from Dungeon Crawler Carl, but it's similar in that in Dungeon Crawler Carl, the characters have to make their ways through these floors in this dungeon and then, down to the next floor, and each floor is different from the one above it. Similarly, in the Books of Babel, our character is making his way up through a tower, and each floor of the tower is, again, different from the one below it in really cool, inventive ways. And I was about to give examples of like what the floors are and like how different they are from each other, but it almost feels spoilery. Like they're really cool, and like that's the part of the story that I like the most right now is the different floors and like how they operate and how they impact the floors above it and like what they're actually intended to do. Like there's the what they are at their face value, but then there's also like the actual overall function of them and like the motivation for making them that way. It gets, there's a lot to it. But it's so cool. I had a lot of fun with this book. I read it a while ago at this point, and I immediately picked up Arm of the Sphinx as soon as I finished it. And I got home and I put this on my shelf. And today is the first time I took it off my shelf, just to bring it down here for this video. I do not know why I haven't picked it up to read yet. I kind of do. You know what it was? I saw two people on the internet talk about how they didn't like it, and that put me off to the series. But I don't care about that. I want to make that decision for myself. So I'm gonna pick this up. Absolutely gonna pick this up in the new year. I look at the spine all the time, and I'm like, I should pick that one up. So 2025 is the year. I'm going to be doing that. The basic premise of this is that our main character Senlin goes on, I think it's their honeymoon with their wife to this tower, the Tower of Babel, which I've already described a little bit about the tower and how the tower works. And immediately, like on the first few pages, his wife vanishes. She's gone. She disappears. He can't find her. And so now he has to go on this like mission to find her. And that's it. That's the premise. That's it. But it's so wacky. The world that we're put in was so cool, and I have heard that we never explore enough of the world. Like the tower exists. The tower is huge. There's a lot to the tower, and the criticism that I feel like I see the most often about this book is that it never gets fully explored, or like we don't see enough of it, and we're left wanting to do more of that. Like all I want is for Arm of the Sphinx to cover more floors, like just keep going up this tower. And I don't know if we do that. Like I feel like, I don't know, maybe it explores more of the characters and not enough of the world. I don't really know, but the characters are great too. The main character specifically, this is going to be just a me thing. I think when reading this book, for whatever reason, the entire time I pictured this one character from Treasure Planet. I don't know why, but this is Senlin in my brain. This is Senlin. Again, I can't tell you why. For me, that added so much to the book. I love this guy, and as a result, I really like Senlin. I was all in for that. That is super weird. I don't know that that's going to resonate with anybody else on this planet, but I couldn't get that out of my head. And again, it added so much. So anyway, I'm very excited. I want to see if this guy manages to find his wife. I doubt that happens in book 2 because I think there are 4 books in total in the series. But unique setting, interesting characters. I'm here for it. Yeah, looking forward to it. Very excited to continue through here. A series that I am less excited to continue through, that's a good segue, is Murderbot. I just, again, talked about this series in my last video. It was like an honorable mention for short books. It was an honorable mention because I don't really like it. So this is a weird one for me to have on this list, but I'm 4 books into this series. I have read 4 novellas in the Murderbot Diaries, and I own 2 more, and there is an additional one on top of this that has been released that I don't own. But I don't know, I'm so conflicted with this series. I love Murderbot itself. Like the robot is great. I love them. The basic idea behind them, they are this robot who hacks their governance module and they become sentient, and through that they become depressed and they just want to sit down and watch TV, but they keep having to like rescue humans because that's their job. I've read book 1 2 or 3 times because I kept like wanting to get into it and like wanting to like it more, so I just kept picking it up. And I like this one. This one's good. It's it's a fun time. And then I read books 2 and 3. And I don't care about these books at all. I don't know. I couldn't tell you one thing that happened in these. Actually, in book 2, there's a new character introduced, Art, and I like them a lot. ART, they're great. But other than that, I don't know anything that happens in these pages. And then I picked up book 4, Artificial Condition, and this was good. It was better than books 2 and 3, I thought. It got a little bit more like back to the roots of the Murderbot Diaries. Like it came back to some stuff that was explored in book 1 is the non-spoilery way of explaining that, I think. And yeah, it was cool. It was, again, not very good, I don't think, but it was better than books 2 and 3. Not quite as good as book 1. But yeah, I don't know, better. It was good. It was like, I think I gave it like 3 stars probably. It was fine. Not bad. I didn't hate that I read it. So why the heck do I want to continue this series in the new year? Because I heard this one's really good. Network Effect. This is the first like full-length novel in the series. And again, I heard it's really good. I heard that it gives us more backstory, more character development, which is what's honestly really lacking in the rest of these, for me at least. I think the premise for Murderbot is so good, but we don't get enough of it. We keep just exploring a situation that Murderbot gets themselves into, but I don't care about that as much. I want to know more about Murderbot themselves. And so I think that I've heard that happens here. That we get more development of the character and the world that we're set in. And I hope that's true. So I do want to pick this up. And if I like this one, like I hope that I do, then I will probably pick up Fugitive Telemetry this year as well. Because again, it goes back to its novella length, like the rest of the series has been. The 7th book in that series I don't own, but I believe that one goes back and it's like another full length novel. I think it's like 250 pages, and I think the cutoff for like a novella is 200 pages. So, whatever. That's a true fact. That doesn't matter for what I'm talking about here, but I have said it. So anyway, that's a weird add to this list, but I do think I'll pick it up next year because I want to like this series so badly. So I don't know. Maybe this is the year for it. And honestly, similar to that is the next one that I want to talk about, which is Legends and Lattes. I read this book, I think last year. It wasn't this year, it was last year. And I liked it. It was good. That was it. That was where I left it. It was okay. We followed our main character. I think her name was Viv. They are an orc, and they have put down the sword. I think the very first scene is just them at the end of a battle, and they're like, wow, I'm sick of this. I'm going to just go open up a coffee shop. And they do that. And that's it. That's it. That's what happens pretty much. They open up a coffee shop. There are some pretty low stakes things that happen, but it's just a cozy read, and it's nice. It was a nice book. I had a nice time reading it. That's it. Cozy fantasy. It was my introduction to cozy fantasy. It was neat. I am looking forward to more. I haven't had like the urge to read more cozy fantasy really in a while. And the prequel novel has come out. That's Bookshops and Bone Dust. And I've heard a little bit of mixed things. Some people like it better than Legends and Lattes. Some people didn't like it quite as much. I know that there's there's one thing that is, kind of one of the focal points of the story that we know doesn't end up being a thing. Wow, that was really poorly explained, but I don't know how to explain this without spoiling anything. But basically, I've heard that something happens in book 1, and we know that thing doesn't exist in book 2. So I don't know. That seems to bother people. I feel like that would bother me if I know that, this is kind of wasted pages where this is a setup to something that I know won't come to fruition. So what's the point, kind of? But to be fair, I don't know. Maybe it has a resolution in this first book or this prequel book that makes it still satisfying. We'll see. I am excited for it. I'm just not that excited for it. I want to read it, but again, I haven't been dying for cozy recently. But I do think that winter vibes could be cozy. So I could see that being picked up sooner rather than later. I'm not sure when I'll fit it in, but again, I am a mood reader. So if I feel like I need a cozy read, this is one that I will pick up. This is actually another one that I talked about in my last video. I think now there's 4 of these that I just talked about last week, but Annihilation is book 1 in the Southern Reach. It was a trilogy, but then they randomly released a 4th book this past year, whatever. This, again, is a novella, which is why it was in my last video, but it is true. I want to read this. This one I am very excited for. This first book was weird. It was so weird, and I think I'll do a reread of the first one before I pick up book 2, because I think that this book deserves that, or that it would benefit from that. I think reading it a second time, I'll get even more out of it, which I got a lot out of it the first time. So I don't really know why I think that's true, but I do. I think that it would be really cool to read it from the beginning, knowing what I know now. Jeff Vandermeer's brain is weird, and I want to get more from that. This story follows a team of researchers as they go into this section of the world that is kind of blocked off. It's behind a barrier, and they go in there to just conduct research. A lot of other teams have done this in the past, and the people that manage to come back from the experience are different, and they're not themselves, or they end up dying or whatever. And we're trying to uncover why that is, sort of, and what this area is. Area X, they call it. Like I said, super weird, but I'm into it. I want to know a lot more, and we're left definitely with a lot of questions at the end of this book. It also managed to be not just about this creepy kind of sci-fi story, but it was also a story about a relationship, our main character and her struggling marriage with her husband, who went to Area X in the past. And the focus on their struggles I actually found really interesting, and I was into that. I mean, it's not a romance by any means, and I'm not a romance reader by any means, but there was something about it that I don't know, I felt for them, and I wanted to hear more about that too, which I don't know if that's something that will continue to be explored in further books, or if similar themes get explored, but if they are, I'm here for those as well. And the last series that I've started reading and that I want to continue reading in 2025 is Stephen Fry's Greek mythology series. I have read book 1, Mythos, and I loved it. I actually read this book initially through the audiobook, which was really well done. Stephen Fry, the author, also narrates the audiobooks, and he did a tremendous job. Really, really good. But it wasn't until I picked up the physical copy of the book that I realized that these books are almost like textbooks. There's a lot of pictures, illustrations throughout the books. Each of them, each book in this series has that same treatment. They have that almost textbook feel to them. These are kind of retellings, Stephen Fry's own version of Greek myths. I have, again, read Mythos. I also own Heroes, and Troy, which I have heard nothing but good things about. And I pre-ordered The Odyssey quite a while back, and I'm looking forward to that showing up at some point. I actually can't remember which of these I'm supposed to read next. I think it's Heroes, but I definitely have like an itch for Greek mythology, so I'm very excited to get back into this. I hope in the next couple of months I can make time for one of these. I think Stephen Fry has a terrific way of explaining the things that happen in this and making these Greek myths digestible and like easily understood. There's a lot of characters and a lot of like names and a lot of lore and things to try to keep in your brain, but there's a lot of footnotes as well that help you kind of keep that organized. I know too, in like the Odyssey, the newest one, I know that the footnotes on some of the sections in the book tell you to refer back to some of these books that I have here in my pile, Mythos and Heroes specifically, but probably Troy as well. And I think by the end of reading all four of them, that I'll have like a very comfortable knowledge of Greek mythology, which I love. I really genuinely enjoy Greek mythology. I've read a few books in that kind of category of book, and I've really enjoyed all of those. And I would love to have like a better baseline knowledge of Greek myths as a whole. So I think these books are a very good way for me to acquire that knowledge. Like I said, I read Mythos on audio only, and I loved that experience. But now that I know that these all have pictures throughout them, I think an immersive read would be the best way to take in these stories. Immersive read being audiobook in your ear while you're holding the physical copy in your hand. And that's how I intend to make it through the rest of these books. I don't know when I'll get to these, but I really hope that I am able to make time for them in 2025. But I've said that about all 12 of these series, so we'll see what happens. I know that I'm going to be starting new series in 2025 as well, and I'll talk about that in my next video a little bit. But I would love to see if I can manage to make it to the end of 2025 with fewer series on this list than I have right now. So at the end of 2025, if I could get to like 10 series like that I'm working my way through, that'd be really great. And I think that's achievable. I just have to finish or catch up on more series than I start, which again is doable. Some of these I'm really only a book away, and some of them they're really short books, and I know that I'll get through them. So yeah, I'm not very intimidated by that idea, that kind of loose target, but I'm also not going to hold myself to it. I don't take this very seriously. I read what I want to read when I want to read it. I think that's a healthy way to go about this sort of thing. And yeah, I'm really excited about all these series. Like I said, there are other series that I have started that I am pretty sure that I'm going to abandon, and that's also fine with me. But these ones that I've mentioned here are all series that I'm anxious to get back to get back into these worlds with these characters and hopefully see where their stories end up. Let me know if you plan on reading any of these along with me. There's a lot of series here that are really great and that I would recommend you checking out. If you have started any of these, let me know. If there are other series that you're in the middle of, I would love to hear that too. That's it. Those are my 12 series. That is all I have for you today. I will see you next week. Bye.